Welcome to the Watering Hole. We're sitting down today with Mr. BJ Barham of American Aquarium.
Hey, how are y'all doing?
We're doing great, man.
Good.
So you're out here at Cain's tonight.
Yeah.
Headlining here. What's it like to be playing at Cain's Ballroom?
It's one of the most magical rooms in the country. This is probably my 12th or 13th time playing Cain's Ballroom, and it never gets old.
Yeah.
This is a yearly stop for us. Tulsa's always been a really good town for us. And when it comes to playing in Tulsa, Oklahoma, this is where you want to be playing in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
There's bigger rooms, there's smaller rooms, but this is the room in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So it's nice to be here again. And it's always nice when we get that invite to come back and do what we do on that stage.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for starters. Thank you for coming on and spending some time.
Heck yeah, man.
Yeah. So we're really excited to be out here at Cain's, and so what's the set list look like for you guys tonight?
It's one of those situations where every night our set list changes. We're one of those bands, we don't play the same set every night. There's some bands that, when they go out on tour, they've got 15 songs, same order, same songs every night. That's just really boring to us. We got 137 songs to choose from.
Yeah.
We're fond of a lot of those songs.
Yeah.
So we like to keep ourselves on our toes and switch it up every night and keep the crowd on their toes. We don't want people coming to the show thinking they know what they're going to hear. We want them to leave being surprised at a few songs. We play 120 minutes every night, 2 hours every night, about 25, 26 songs every single night.
Wow.
And so I'd say about 10 or 11 of those songs are kind of the standards that we kind of we can't get away without playing.
Yeah.
We got to play Losing Side of 25. We got to play Burn, Flicker, Die. Got to play I Hope Breaks Your Heart. But for the most part, we also try to mix it up with songs that we want to play, songs that the band really likes playing.
Yeah.
Maybe songs we hadn't played in a couple months, just to keep everything fresh.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Do you get tired of those main songs? Do you maybe not tired of them, but wish you could not play them some nights and swap them out for other songs that you don't get to play as often?
They pay my bills.
Yeah.
Those songs are the reason we're here. Those songs are what we rode the back of those songs to get to Cain's Ballroom.
Yeah.
I always hate going to see a band and all they want to play is the new stuff. It's my least favorite thing. And I get it, as an artist, that's the stuff that we're most excited about because it's an accurate representation of kind of where we are as a band. There's this, when you get on that stage, you want to show people this is where I am as an artist and you want to play the new stuff. But I think the important part is reminding people that not everybody found you with the new stuff. There's plenty of our fans that found us in 2008 with Dances for the Lonely, 2012, Burn, Flicker, Die, 2020, Lamentations. And maybe they found the new record. Mm. Every one of those people deserve to hear a few songs off their favorite album. I might not play your favorite song every night, but you will leave this show reminded why we're your favorite band.
That's awesome.
You'll leave this show every single night reminded why you fell in love with this band in the first place. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. I think it's important to remember that everybody got on this ride at different times. And you got to remind people sometimes what they fell in love with.
Yeah.
Where does someone acquire a Duke's Mayo hat?
Duke's Mayonnaise mailed all this stuff to me.
Really?
Turns out when you mention them in a song, they'll give you anything you ask for. They sent us all a big care package. We got the socks and the hats and the shirts and the sweatshirts. They even sent my kid a big pool raft for our swimming pool.
Really? That's
just
awesome.
a giant jar of Duke's mayonnaise. My kid just floats around in the pool on a giant jar of mayonnaise. It's nice. Everybody has kind of brand allegiances. It's, you eat what your parents ate or what your grandparents ate.
Yeah.
And being from North Carolina, that's very much a Southern thing is Duke's mayonnaise. And
so tell me about growing up in North Carolina. Obviously, we're both from Oklahoma, so kind of I think we're shut off from the North Carolina music scene even. So
yeah.
What's it like there?
It's the same. If I've learned anything, growing up in small town America is the same. Mm-hmm. You just got a different accent, you got a different state, you got different music you listen to. But for the most part, it's the same experience. Especially kids that grew up at the same time as me. I'm learning that a lot of people had that same experience. A song like Cherokee Purples is just an account of how I was raised. So fast forward, we put that song out. We travel around the country. There's people in Montana, there's people in Arizona, there's people in Boston who are I had the same experience growing up. Mm-hmm. Going to my grandma's house in the summertime, being raised by your grandparents. Both my parents worked jobs. Mm-hmm. So in the summertime when we were out of school, my grandma was the default babysitter. And you were kind of raised by this different generation of people that just kind of cut you loose in the backyard for 10 hours every day and let you run around like a bunch of heathens, just a bunch of rusty machetes trying to chop down trees and stuff, riding four-wheelers, going fishing, going hunting. You know, that's just kind of what we did. And you think that you have this very unique childhood until you start talking about it, and other people are like, oh, I had the same exact childhood.
Yeah.
You might have did different things, but we were all kind of raised by the same people, by the same generation. And I think, you know, when you're raised by a group of people, you know, born in, you know, the 20s and 30s, like you were raised that way.
Yeah.
And so I'm thankful for how I was raised, because you write about it. And again, you think you're writing about this unique experience, and then you put a song out and it becomes the song that resonates the most with people because they were raised kind of the exact same way. We might have been raised thousands of miles apart, but it's pretty much the same.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So you just talked about it a little bit right there, but where did the inspiration for Cherokee Purples come from? I mean, was there a moment when you're like, okay, I got to write a song about this?
Well, I was writing a song about something else, and I hit a wall, and I took a break, and I went in the kitchen. My wife was like, how's the song coming? I was like, oh, it's slow but steady. And I started making the sandwich. It's a tomato sandwich. Very simple.
With Duke's Mayo.
Just Duke's Mayo. 2 pieces of white bread, Duke's Mayo on both sides, fresh cut tomato from the garden, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, cut that thing in half. It's perfect. Simple but perfect. So I go in there and I start making the sandwich, and every time I make the sandwich, apparently I talk about my grandma. I talk about, oh God, this reminds me so much. And my wife jokingly, you know, as many wives do, was like, you should go write a song about it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go in there and write a song about it. So it started off kind of a tongue-in-cheek song about tomato sandwiches. But once I started writing down the feelings that come with that sandwich, that sense memory, that human phenomenon where a sight, a sound, a taste, a smell immediately takes you back to a very specific point in your life, the song kind of wrote itself. Once I realized it wasn't a tongue-in-cheek song about tomato sandwiches, once I realized it was a kind of an account of my childhood, like a really, really fond memory of my childhood, then it became something really special. But I wrote that one afternoon, I was starting another song and got sidetracked and wrote this song after eating a sandwich.
Wow.
And that's where that line came from, because I thought it was so funny that I was sitting here writing this song, something silly as a sandwich, you know, brings you back to the forefront of my memory.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's admitting in the third verse of that song, like, I know this is silly, that something this stupid makes me really almost tear up thinking about my grandmother, but that's where we are.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's something, like you said even before, that's something everybody relates to. Like, everybody has that one thing that reminds them of like their grandparents or their childhood or something like that. So to write a song about that and put it in that form is something everybody can relate to in one way or another.
And that's what you want out of a song.
Yeah.
You want people to be able to listen to it. And even if they didn't experience the exact same thing you experienced, you want them to be able to find a piece of themselves in that song. And that's my favorite thing about songwriting, is writing these very, very specific songs to me. Like, I can tell you the exact thing these songs are about, but then putting it out into the world and then traveling and then hearing everybody else's story about where that song takes them.
Yeah.
What memories, what emotions it brings out of them. And that's the thing that never gets old for me as a songwriter.
Yeah.
That's something I was going to mention about that song. Like, although I may not have experienced those same exact things, when I listen to that song, it takes me back to my childhood. And it's like, I think of my own memories or my own, you know, circumstances at that time. But even though I can't relate directly to the lyrics in that song, I mean, it takes me back to my childhood.
It's a trigger. That's all. That's all it's meant to be, is a trigger. It's this thing that elicits an emotion out of you. And, you know, when you hear that song, you immediately think, oh, that's about his grandma. And then you're like, oh, wait, I've got some of those feelings. I've got some of those emotions about my grandma. And it might not be a tomato sandwich. It might be your grandma's fried chicken. It might be the hardwood, you know, the wood panel walls in the living room. It might be the cigarette stained ceiling, the smell of, you know, food and cigarettes. That's another thing that anytime I walk into a house that's got wood on the walls and I can smell that nicotine, I'm just like, fuck, I am here again.
Yeah.
And I think everybody has those little tiny triggers that when you see it in the real world, it immediately takes you back to that really special time in your life. And it can also do the same thing for negative stuff. Like, now that I'm getting to the age where I've lost a lot of people that I care about, lost my mother, lost my grandmother, there's some things that I'll see or hear, and it'll immediately make me think like, man, they're not here anymore. They're gone. So I think sense memory works in a positive and a negative way, and this is just about really celebrating the positive side of sense memory.
Yeah, that's really well put.
Thanks.
And so you have a deep catalog of songs you've written. Obviously, I mean, a lot of albums, a lot of singles. But you also have a catalog of covers. You guys did 2 albums full of covers. Can you tell me what the motivation behind doing those albums with the covers?
Not just any covers.
Yeah.
Slappers, bangers, and certified twangers.
Yeah.
90s country music. It's what I was raised on. That's all again, sense memory.
Yeah.
Anytime I hear a Joe Diffie song come on the radio, I am immediately back in the back seat of a 1984 S10 Blazer, hot vinyl seats, all 4 windows rolled down because the air conditioners broke, just a cassette in the tape deck, the vinyl seats burning the back of my legs as a kid, just screaming John Deere Green, screaming Pickup Man, screaming just these really wonderful songs, really well-written songs. The 90s, they had a level of cheese to them. Like, there was some cheesiness in the 90s, but like there were still songwriting songs. Now we don't have songwriter songs.
Yeah.
Like, back then, they were still story songs. And that's what I love so much about 90s, because that was kind of the last hoorah of like story songs on the radio that weren't just like redneck Mad Lib. Now you turn on the radio, it's just cold beer, pretty girl, dirt road. Like that. It's just like the same stuff set to like triggers and hip hop beats. And, it's not for me. But the 90s, even though some of it was cheesy, like Queen of My Double Wide Trailer, that's a funny song. It's a tongue-in-cheek song, but it's a story song. And in 3 minutes, you're told an entire story about this couple that has the ups and downs, but they still love each other. And every now and then, she's got to go run around on him to remind him what he's got waiting for him at home. Even though they live in a double-wide trailer and don't have the best life, they are rich. They are in love with each other. And those are the kind of, man, I wish country radio had those songs again. Catchy songs that had the really big hooks, really because John Deere Green's a great song, but when you get to that chorus, it's undeniable. You're singing that at the top of your lungs the minute you hear it. And so I always had this kind of affinity for 90s country. I was raised on it. And then I found out a lot of the boys were raised on it as well, and we all had that in common. And so I've been threatening to make this record for a decade now. I've been threatening to do a country record, like a covers record.
Yeah.
We just never had the time, and we always had, if we were going to go into a studio and pay money to be in a studio, we're going to make our own records.
Yeah.
We've never been a cover band live. We never do a lot of covers, like in our live sets. But then the pandemic happened, and a global pandemic. People ask me what it's going to take to get another covers record. I'm like, the world's shutting down for another 2 years. You might get another set of cover records if the world shuts down for another 2 years, because it gave us the time. You got to think, me and the boys, we recorded that first group of songs probably like November of 2020, because it came out in May of 2021. So that first set of songs we did, 7-8 months into the pandemic. We hadn't seen each other. We hadn't been a band. We hadn't played shows.
Wow.
And so it gave us an opportunity to get together in a safe spot. We all were in separate tracking rooms. We all, did it as safely as we could, but it allowed us just to be in the same room and play songs together, play music together. Because I didn't have the next record completely finished yet. So it didn't make sense to put out, I'm not one of those EP guys. If you're going to go in the studio, do it right. Go ahead and put your record out. But it gave us a reason to get together and play music, and it was fun. You could hear it on those records. Like, both those records were only 3 days in the studio. It took us 3 days to make the first one, 3 days to make the second one.
Wow.
And it's just the band doing your homework, getting into the studio, and just playing them live until it feels right. And you can hear it. When I listen back to those songs, I hear a band that's cutting those songs live and just having an absolute ball. And, they're not meant to be perfect. They're not meant to be flawless. I ain't trying to out-sing Faith Hill. I'm not trying to build a career as a radio country singer. It was just me and my buddies getting together in a studio and doing something fun in a very dark time. And I think that's what people really enjoyed about it. Not just the topic or the songs that we picked, but it was this kind of like little bright spot, you know, because like you got to think, you know, live music wasn't back yet.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, here comes this, your favorite band puts out 10 of your favorite songs from your childhood in a pretty dark spot. Like a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people's families were affected. People dying. Are we ever going to get out of this weird cycle of just death? And all of a sudden, a band puts out this thing that even if it's for a minute, takes your mind off the negativity in the world, takes your mind off the dumb stuff. And you're reminded like, oh, we can just have fun tonight. This weekend, we're going to crack a cold beer and put on 10 of our favorite 90s country songs. And it really resonated with people, enough so that we went back in the studio a couple months later and cut another volume of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we looked at the timeline and we're like, well, we're not getting back to work for another 6 months. Let's go do another record. So that first one came out in May, and by December, we had volume 2 was out in December. And that's a neat thing to, you know.
How did you guys narrow down the songs? I know
it started off as probably a couple hundred songs. Yeah. And then we realized that like we have to be a little bit more specific. So we set it up. Each record would have 5 songs by a male voice, 5 songs by a female voice. All the songs, except for one of the songs, was recorded between 1993 and 1994. The only other song outside of that was 1996's Heads Carolina, Tails California by Jody Messina.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Everything else was 93, 94. Nothing could be recorded in the 80s. Nothing could be recorded in the 2000s. So it was very much a 90s country record.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good stuff that was recorded late 80s that got left off and just missed the cut. Also, one of the rules was we didn't want to record a song by somebody who was still really famous. So there's no George Strait songs, there's no Garth Brooks songs, there's no Reba McEntire songs. So it's all, I'm not going to call them one-hit wonders, but definitely like 90s country artists.
Yeah, specifically
like are remembered for the work they did in the 90s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, there's a couple exclusions to that, you know. But for the most part, the heyday of those 20 songs that we did, when we didn't repeat any artist on any records.
Yeah.
So it's 20 artists, 10 male, 10 female, whose heyday was the 90s. And so once you start setting up those parameters, a lot of songs get excluded.
Yeah.
And then you have a list of songs to pick from, and there's some that you're like, which one do we do? Mm-hmm. Which Sammy Kershaw song do we do? You know, it came down to, Queen of My Double Wide won out, but Vidalia was right there. We wanted to cut Vidalia so bad because that's like one of my favorite Sammy Kershaw songs. And, it comes down to, it's kind of like the NCAA March Madness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It comes down to you put the songs up against each other, and you're like, which song's better?
Yeah.
And Queen of My Double Wide won out. And another thing, all those songs were top 10 hits. So there was no like random songs. There was no like deep cut B-side.
Yeah.
All those songs were top 10 hits, like Bonafide.
Yeah.
When you listen to those songs, if you grew up in that era, you know every one of those songs.
Yeah.
There's no curveball on those records. It's all all filler. I mean, all killer, no filler, man. It's good stuff.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. Like growing up in the 90s, and even just whatever era you grew up in, those songs, like we both grew up in the 2000s, so like a lot of like the 2000s, like early 2000s, mid 2000s music is what like I remember from my childhood. I still love a lot of those songs. So yeah, that's really interesting. I would love to see a lot of bands do something similar, even if it's just like maybe they didn't like grow up on country music, but they like really love like old grunge or whatever, and they just like cut a lot of this. It's a really great concept. Man, I love it.
It was really fun because like it again, outside of just us getting together and having fun as a band, it really reconnected us to like what we grew up on. Mm-hmm. And so like my dad listens to that record and he's like, this is the kind of stuff I played for you growing up.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you cut the record. I think the best part was about making those records was I'd say about 90% of the artists that we covered sent me a message or an email or like a video message like thanking me for like covering the songs.
That's awesome.
Like Toby Keith made me this really nice video that was like, hey man, like I listening to your single, thanks for cutting Should Have Been a Cowboy. Y'all did a really great job. Like Patty Loveless sent me an email. Sawyer Brown, I still talk to those boys to this day. I've done like Mark's podcast. I've met them in person. They've come to shows. Like some of those, like we connected with them, and it was like, man, like who would have thought that these artists that I grew up turning the FM dial and listening for would know who I am?
Yeah.
And take the time out of their day to send me a message and say, hey, thanks for cutting this tune.
Wow. That's really cool.
It's pretty neat, man.
Yeah.
Something we didn't expect. You know, when you make those songs, you're just hoping you don't get a "y'all ruined my song, thanks a lot." You know, that's the only thing you're hoping. That's the message you're really hoping you don't get.
Yeah, for sure.
So I gotta ask, what's the meaning behind the name, or how did you guys come up with the name?
It's funny. The band that played here the last 2 nights, Wilco. It's a Wilco song. They just played Cain's Ballroom
Oh, really?
Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite bands in the whole wide world. They put out a record my senior year in high school that like changed my life, a record called Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. And the very first line of the very first song on that record, the first line is, "I'm an American Aquarium drinker, I assassin down the avenue." I have no idea what that means, but it stuck with me.
Yeah.
I thought it was such a unique line. And so when it came time, you know, you start a band, you book your first gig, and they're like, what name goes up on the marquee? You're like, American Aquarium. And then that was 20 years ago. And here we are still playing. And it's fun because, you know, we've got to play with the Wilco a few times, like open up for them at festivals and stuff. And they're very aware that there's this young band from North Carolina. Well, I guess we're not young anymore. It just shows how much older Wilco is now than, you know, because when I started this band, they were getting in, they were veterans. And so here we are 20 years later, and there's some, you know, bunch of rednecks from North Carolina that named their band after some line out of one of their songs. It's a neat feeling.
That's really interesting. I noticed you got some NC State sliders on over here.
Oh, yeah,
Are you
man.
a big Wolfpack fan?
Big Wolfpack guy. That's where I went to school.
Really?
02 06. I was at NC State studying political science and history, and I gave up college for the rock and roll life.
I would say you've used your degree a lot.
Yeah. I think it's helped in the songwriting. I think it's been pretty. You know, it just gave me a different kind of platform to talk about what I believe in. I was going to go to law school, and the world doesn't need any more lawyers. It needs more songwriters.
Yeah.
Big shout out to the lawyers out there, though. Y'all are doing the Lord's work out there. But once I got on stage and played songs in front of people, there was no going back. But I still stay really involved in the university. I help raise a lot of money for the NIL programs for football and basketball.
That's awesome.
I go back. You know, we've played Homecoming, we played Packapalooza, we play all the student stuff, you know, where they shut down the street and they have a band in. We go back and play that stuff. And, you know, I went over to the chancellor's house and played his guitars. And, you know, the university's really embraced what we do as a band. When you drop out of school, the university calls you a college dropout. But the minute you find success in what you dropped out of school for, they call you a distinguished alumni. And now I'm a distinguished alumni, which feels good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, you know,
Did you get the honorary degree with
I
it?
haven't got the honorary degree. Shout out to Chancellor Woodson. I'm still expecting that one of these days. I went over to his house. We were playing guitars, and he's like, "Is there anything I can do for you?" I was like, "One of these days, you can give me one of them honorary pieces of paper to put up on my wall." But yeah, it's nice because NC State is where I found myself as a person. I moved there. I was just a redneck kid from Reidsville, North Carolina. I moved to one of the biggest cities I could. Went to school there, and I found myself. I found my calling. I found music. I found a community. I found songwriting. I found this thing that I wanted to do. Academia had taken up so much of my life up until the time I turned 18, 19. And the minute I moved to the city and found like independent music, and I found like rock clubs that you could go to, because before I went to college, I was from a small town. We didn't have rock clubs. We didn't have music venues. So there was only 2 kinds of artists. There was like Tim McGraw, like big artist on the country radio, and then there was like your drunk uncle that plays like guitar
Yeah.
at like the family reunion, like around the bonfire or something. I had no idea there was this middle ground of like you could just travel the country and play in front of a couple hundred people every night and make a living doing it.
Yeah.
And so once I found out that, I dove pretty deep into that, and then started paying a little bit less and less and less attention to my schoolwork and started focusing more on writing songs and how am I going to take this thing on the road. And then, me and my daughter are really involved in going to the sports. So like, you know, last year we followed the basketball team when they made that big run to the Final Four.
Yeah.
You know, we did the ACC championship, we did the Sweet 16, we did the Elite Eight. We went out to the Final Four and watched them. I travel to all the football games. I go to all the bowl games. Really stay about women's basketball, volleyball, men's wrestling, baseball. I stay really involved in all the athletics just because I love the school. I love the school.
Yeah.
You know, I think anybody that goes to school and really falls in love with the culture, you know, it follows you the rest of your life. And when you're a fan of NC State, you know, I don't have to tell OU and OSU fans around here, like, sometimes you got to pull for the team that gets beat a lot.
Yeah.
And or the team that lets you down when they're not supposed to let you down. And that's a big thing about NC State is, like, we always say, Phillip Rivers played football for us, and he had a quote. He said, "The Wolfpack ain't for soft people." He's like, being part of the Wolfpack ain't for soft people. You know, you gotta be pretty tough to, like, endure that much mediocrity.
Yeah.
And then you really appreciate, like, stuff like last year where, you know, this team of people, you know, the lovable losers that went on a Final Four run and just was beating some of the best teams in the country. It was really fun to witness it and watch it, especially with my kiddo.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, who are you listening to right now? Like, is there someone maybe that you're listening to that you think's kind of underrated, that you think people need to check out? Is somebody out there that you guys are touring with that you think's underrated?
Man, I always tell people, if you ever wonder what I'm listening to, check and see who's opening for us. I don't know what y'all got in the water here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but all my favorite songwriters tend to come from Tulsa, Oklahoma. My favorite record of the year so far is a guy named John Moreland here in Tulsa. He's got a record called Visitor that's so good. We just took Ken Pomeroy out on tour. She's fantastic. She's from here in Tulsa. We got a Tulsa boy on tour with us right now, a guy named Justin Bloss. He was my most listened to album on Spotify this year.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, I really love his music, and it's a real honor to have him out on the road with us, just because, you know, I've spent the year really getting to know his songs, and so to be able to take out your favorite,
Yeah.
that's like the best part about my gig is, like, we're at a point now where touring has become embarrassingly comfortable. Like, we just, you know, I get on the bus every night and I fall asleep and I magically wake up in the next town.
Yeah.
And I get to go get good food, and I get to go get a cup of coffee. I get to see what I want to see, and I get to play music in front of people every night that give a shit. But one of the real treats of where we are as a touring band right now is being able to take out artists that I believe in, artists that maybe, you know, I always tell people, I don't care if you sell 0 tickets. I don't care. I just want to be able to watch you for 45 minutes every night. I want to be able to listen to your songs for 45 minutes every night. I'm never going to ask our fan base to listen to music for 45 minutes that I'm not willing to listen to for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm never just going to put something out there because it sells tickets or it's popular. You know, there's plenty of bands we could take out that are worth tickets, and, you know, I don't care about that.
Yeah.
I care about putting quality songwriters out there for people to find quality songwriters. And there's a lot of really big artists that are terrible songwriters. And there's a lot of really great songwriters that will never play in front of more than 20 people. I want to take those 20. I don't care if you sell 20 tickets.
Yeah.
I want to take you out, and I want people to hear your songs because I believe in them. And I wish more artists did that.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of hear of that a little bit, but not to that extent. I mean, not to the extent you're talking. So that is really cool to hear about that.
I don't know, man. I think it's your job. If you're like a songwriter that people really like or people really respect, I think they also really respect your opinions. And your opinion should be like trying, like, yes, I'm a musician, but first and foremost, I'm a music fan. I love music. I listen to music all the time. And I'm always trying to find new music, trying to find that next songwriter that I think is going to be like the best. And it's fun because, like, you hit the nail on the head sometimes. You find these artists, you know. Like the first couple times we toured through West Virginia, Kentucky, there was this kid named Tyler Childers opening up for us. And we knew from the beginning where that kid's going to be really, really good one day. Fast forward 10 years, and he's one of the biggest acts in music. There was a young lady from Virginia. We fell in love with her music 10 years ago. And we took her out on the road with us, and that was Morgan Wade. And now she's crushing it right now. My Great 48 tour, acoustic tour I did in 2017, I took an unknown songwriter out named Charlie Crockett, and he opened up to every show for me on that tour. And it's just about finding stuff you believe in. And I love watching these artists get massive because it reminds me that, like, I still got a pretty good ear for it.
Yeah.
You know, now if I could just figure out how to follow their trajectory, I'll be doing fine. But I love the fact that some of my favorite artists are in my phone, and I can talk to them, and I can send them a text message. My heroes have become my friends, and I'm really, really lucky. Not a day goes by where I take for granted the platform that I have and the job that I have, and in turn the responsibility I have to try to push good music out there to people and try to write better songs today than I wrote yesterday, and then wake up again tomorrow and try to write a better song tomorrow than I did today. That's the goal. That's
awesome. Whenever you're not songwriting and you're not touring, what are you doing at home? Do you got any hobbies?
I'm a dad, man. I love being a dad. I'm very fortunate. I play about 70 shows a year, and the other 300 days out of the year, I'm home. Yeah. And I'm very fortunate. My wife doesn't work a job. I'm lucky. So when we're home, we're just a pretty tight knit family. My circle is very, very small. Not a lot of people are in my circle. When I'm home, I'm home. Mm-hmm. I get to cut off and unplug and be a dad, be a husband, be a family guy, and I love that. That's my favorite thing in the world. I read a lot. That's my hobby. I'm a pretty voracious reader. I think most songwriters I really love are the same. Constantly trying, just words. I'm fascinated by language.
Yeah.
Fascinated on finding new ways to say something that we all have heard a million times.
Yeah.
And reading books is a really great way of doing that, because there's a lot of short story writers that are really good at writing these really big stories, but they don't know how to condense it into 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm the same way. I can write a 3-minute story that takes you on this ride, but I couldn't imagine writing 300 pages of something.
Yeah.
So it's like this mutual admiration of we all make a living with words and emotion and stories. But I love people that can, really expound upon it and make it like a 300-page deep dive into this one thing that I'm like, you could have said that in 3.5 minutes, and here's how you could do it. And I read a lot though, but when I'm home, man, it's, I got a 6-year-old daughter, and she's everything to me, and just trying to be the best dad I can. She knows that dad's a rock and roller, and she knows what dad does for a living. But she also knows that, Dad, I'm at the point now, I've never let that kid down, ever. And I've let everybody in my life down. I've let my friends, my wife, my band, every single person that's ever invested anything in me, I've let them down at least once or twice. And my kid's the one person I haven't let down, ever. Never missed a dance recital, a school play, a birthday. Now that she's in school, I take the entire summers off. I don't play shows in the summer anymore, just so I can travel with her, show her the world.
That's awesome.
And I like that. My hobby is just trying to give her a better life than I had, and in turn, just having a really fun time watching her grow up.
Yeah, that's really cool. When it comes to reading, are you like a nonfiction or a fiction guy?
I'm a fiction guy.
A fiction guy?
Nonfiction stuff. I tend to watch documentaries a lot when it comes to the nonfiction stuff.
Yeah.
Instead of reading the 700-page World War II book, I'd rather watch a Ken Burns documentary on World War II. But fiction is something, because I kind of operate in this world of taking my experiences in life, whether it be emotional or social, and then trying to run that through a filter of a story, making up a story that I can get this point across, but without saying I did this or I did that or I felt this. Telling this story that makes the people feel exactly what I felt without having to come out and say it. Mm-hmm. And books do that for me. Fiction writing does that for me. I love people that can pull stories out of thin air and then just write about it, because that's what I do. I like being able to when somebody comes up to me and is like, "Is that song true?" My first question is did you believe it was true? And if they say yes, then I'm like, then I did my job as a songwriter. It doesn't matter if it's true. You believed it was true.
Yeah.
So that's all you need to know is I did a good enough job, whether or not it was telling a straight out story that happened or something I completely fabricated. You believed it.
Yeah.
And you felt something because of that. Doesn't matter if I made it up or if I lived it. I told the story good enough to where you believed it and felt something.
No, I didn't murder someone.
That's the easy thing. Don't ask Chris Knight that question. Pretty sure he's killed somebody. I listen to his songs. I believe every one of his songs. And, it's one of those things where obviously Chris didn't kill anybody, I don't think. Wouldn't that be something after,
where are the bodies, Chris?
Yeah, wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something like after he's long gone, they dig up the back of his property and sure as shit, like right by the creek, there's like 30 bodies. He's like, he told us in those songs for years, for 30 years, the man just told us where the bodies were, and none of us believed it. Yeah, like, I listen to those songs and you know I fall in. Like, I love Chris's writing, but like you get done with those songs and you have to start asking yourself questions. You're like, did he do it? like, because that song's too good for him to like not done it. Like, does he know somebody that did it? You know, that's what I love about songwriting is like if you're good at it, you can take people on this crazy ride that you've never even been on yourself, but you're taking other people on this ride because you wrote about it so well. Yeah, that's the best part about it.
That's awesome.
Well, BJ, we can't thank you enough for taking some time to come on. We've really invaded your space here, so we can't thank you enough.
Thank you guys so much for coming out and setting up in the historic Cain's Ballroom Green Room.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hell yeah. Thank y'all for having me.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate y'all.